So the biggest measure is to reduce the amount of pollution, but an interim measure, and one of the ways you might do that is by electrifying your vehicle fleet, maybe by better planning so that you take heavy vehicles, lorries and buses, away from pedestrians. But as an interim measure, one possibility is to use specially selected plants, which are very effective at capturing and removing some of the particles from the air pollution. And if you can put those in suitable places, especially if you protect the most vulnerable of the populations. So some of the most vulnerable of the population are young children. So I know plenty of places in the UK where primary age school children, their school and their playground is right next door to a very big and very busy road. It's the worst place you can have young children. So maybe in the interim, before you reduce your pollution emissions, you can use specially selected plant species and grow them as barriers between the children and the source of the traffic pollution. Maybe that's one thing that could be done quite quickly and quite easily and cheaply that would make at least a little bit of a difference to those people. It's been known for quite a long time that pollution particles can affect your lungs, they can affect your heart, but our recent work demonstrated also that particles, very small particles, are able to be transported directly through the nose, directly through the nerves that connect the nose to the brain, and travel directly into the frontal cortex of the brain. And many of those particles are rich in metals, very reactive metals, and in particular they're rich in iron. And iron is toxic to brain cells, so the body works very hard to keep the amount of iron in the brain under very tight control. But if you're walking down a busy road, you'll be breathing in literally hundreds of thousands of iron-rich nanoparticles, and at least some of those are going to be able to directly access the front of your brain, where they can cause cell damage and eventually cell death. So it's pretty well established now that exposure to traffic pollution and other forms of pollution, but especially traffic pollution, is associated with a higher risk of dementia. And these particles and the damage they can cause, they represent a very plausible route by which that damage can be caused. The problem with this pollution is that it's invisible. It's an invisible and dangerous hazard. But if you know that actually anywhere near busy roads you're going to be affected by those invisible pollution particles, then you should take every step you can to reduce your own dose. And whatever you can do, so if you don't need to commute at the busiest times of day, or if you can take an alternative route, if you're walking, even if you step 1.5 meters away from the curbside, your dose will be reduced. It sounds strange, but if you walk on the downhill traffic side of the street rather than the uphill side, then the vehicles are not working so hard on the downhill side and they produce less pollution. Certainly trying to avoid wherever vehicles are constantly braking and accelerating again, that's where you'll get a hot spot of pollution. So anything in your own power that you can do to reduce your own dose is a good thing. It's very difficult. So I believe in London that the low emission zone that was created in London has not produced the expected fall in the amount of particulate pollution that was hoped for and anticipated by that policy. And so it may be that the most polluting vehicles are still using that area. So many of the particles are actually being produced by lorries and buses, as well as by older cars. There's also an interesting question. So older vehicles used to produce more of the bigger particles, and it's the case that some of the newer engines, instead of producing large particles, they produce more of the ultra fine particles. So there may be an inadvertent worsening of the problem through technology actually producing more ultrafine particles rather than fewer of the larger particles. So that there's work needed to understand exactly what sort of pollution control measures are actually going to be the most effective.